A Christmas invitation. The snow fell softly on Christmas Eve, coating the city park in a blanket of pristine white. Golden lights twinkled from every tree, casting warm circles of light across the peaceful winter scene. The air was crisp and still, filled with the quiet magic that only comes on this most special of nights. Marcus Hayes sat alone on a wooden bench, his expensive overcoat doing little to ward off the chill that had settled deep in his bones. At 35, he was one of the youngest CEOs in the city, running a successful tech company that employed hundreds of people. His penthouse apartment overlooked this very park, but tonight, he couldn't bear to be surrounded by those empty walls and expensive furniture that meant nothing to him. The park was nearly deserted. Most families were home, gathered around their Christmas trees, sharing stories and laughter. Marcus watched his breath form small clouds in the cold air as he thought about how different his evening could have been. There had been invitations, 2 parties of course, there always were, but they felt hollow, filled with people who wanted something from him rather than simply wanting to be with him. His phone buzzed constantly in his pocket, with messages from business associates and distant relatives who remembered him only on holidays. He had stopped checking them an hour ago. The silence of the park felt more honest than all those empty well-wishes combined. As Marcus sat there, lost in his thoughts, he became aware of footsteps crunching through the snow nearby. A man about his own age was walking slowly along the path, his hands pushed deep into his coat pockets. Beside him walked a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, bundled up in a burgundy coat that seemed too big for her small frame. Her blonde curls peeked out from under a gray knitted hat with a fuzzy pom-pom that bounced as she walked. The child was carrying a small paper bag, and she kept looking around the park with wide, curious eyes. When her gaze fell on Marcus, sitting alone on the bench, she stopped walking entirely. Her father, noticing she had fallen behind, turned to see what had captured her attention. "Daddy," the little girl said in a voice that carried clearly through the quiet evening air. "Why is that man sitting all by himself on Christmas Eve?" Marcus felt a tightness in his chest. Even a child could see his loneliness so clearly. He looked down at his hands, suddenly self-conscious about being discovered in this vulnerable moment. The man glanced over at Marcus, then back at his daughter. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe he's just enjoying the quiet evening." But the little girl wasn't satisfied with that answer. She tugged on her father's sleeve and whispered something Marcus couldn't quite hear. The man shook his head gently, but the child was persistent. After a moment of quiet discussion, she broke away from her father's side and walked directly toward Marcus's bench. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely, her small voice brave despite the way she fidgeted with the paper bag in her hands. "Are you waiting for someone?" Marcus looked up, surprised by the directness of the question. The little girl's eyes were bright blue and filled with genuine concern. Behind her, the man watched nervously, ready to intervene if needed. "No," Marcus said quietly. "I'm not waiting for anyone." The child tilted her head, studying him with the frank curiosity that only children possess. "Are you sad because it's Christmas and you're alone?" The question hit Marcus like a gentle blow. He had been trying so hard to convince himself that he preferred the solitude, that he had chosen to be here. But this child saw right through his careful facade. "A little bit," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. The little girl nodded solemnly, as if this was exactly what she had suspected. Then, without hesitation, she climbed up onto the bench beside him, her small legs swinging freely above the snowy ground. "My name is Emma," she announced. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied, finding himself smiling despite his melancholy mood. "Well, Marcus," Emma said with the serious tone of someone making an important decision, "my daddy and I are going home to have Christmas dinner. We always make too much food because daddy isn't very good at cooking for just 2 people. She paused, looking up at him with those earnest blue eyes. "Do you want to have dinner with us?" Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. The invitation was so simple, so pure, offered without any agenda or expectation of what he might be able to give in return. When was the last time someone had invited him somewhere just because they wanted his company? "Oh, I couldn't," he began, automatically, the polite refusal that had become second nature in his business dealings. "Why not?" Emma asked, genuinely puzzled. "Do you have somewhere else to go?" Marcus opened his mouth to lie, to say he had other plans, but found he couldn't do it. Not to this child who had shown him more kindness in 5 minutes than he had experienced in months. "No," he said softly. "I don't have anywhere else to go." Emma's father had approached during their conversation and now stood nearby watching this exchange with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. "I'm sorry," the man said to Marcus. "She has a very soft heart. I'm David, by the way, David Chen." He extended his hand, which Marcus shook gratefully. "Marcus Hayes," he replied. "We really would be happy to have you join us," David continued, his voice warm with sincerity. "Emma's right about making too much food. And to be honest, it gets a bit quiet with just the 2 of us." Marcus looked between the father and daughter, seeing something in their faces that he recognized. They weren't just being polite. They were lonely too in their own way. A father and daughter spending Christmas together, probably missing someone who should have been there with them. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked, hardly daring to believe this moment was real. Very sure, Emma said firmly, hopping down from the bench. Come on, we're having turkey and mashed potatoes and green beans. And Daddy made cookies, but they're a little burnt on the bottom. David laughed, a sound that echoed warmly through the snowy park. She's right about the cookies, I'm still learning. As they walked through the park together, Emma chattering happily between them, Marcus felt something shift inside his chest. The ache of loneliness that had been his constant companion began to ease, replaced by something he had almost forgotten existed. Hope. The golden lights seemed brighter now, the snow more beautiful, the whole world transformed by the simple magic of human kindness. Sometimes, Marcus thought, the best gifts come in the smallest packages, offered by the most unexpected people. He looked down at Emma, who had slipped her small mittened hand into his, and realized that this Christmas Eve would be one he would remember forever, not because of any grand gesture or expensive gift, but because a little girl had seen his loneliness and decided to do something about it. The snow continued to fall softly around them as they made their way toward home, toward warmth, toward the kind of Christmas miracle that happens when hearts open to one another in the quiet magic of a winter evening.